Welcome. Good afternoon. It is Feel It Friday. Yes, it is. And I have been feeling it all day long on the phone to my internet service providers. OMG. So Feel It Friday is here. My name is Markabadi. It's such a pleasure and an honor to be able to bring you budding luminaries from around the world, those people who have a heart and inspiration and collaboration to share with you. Today we've a fantastic lineup. We have Dave Stringer all the way from Ireland, and I'll be busting out some of my Irish accents, and they are terrible. As you can see, absolutely terrible. I go into a Londoner, I don't know what's happening. Dave Stringer is a fantastic kirtan artist, a musician, and a very interesting being. Maybe he'll tell the story of when we first met. And then after Dave, we have Swami Beyondananda, aka Steve Behrman, the philosophical, comical Swami. So please like, share. If you hit under the video, the share button, host a watch party, have a watch party. That's the best way, and share it onto different groups and blah, blah, blah. Share and like, yeah. Okay, so without further ado, Dave.
Hey there, Mark. I'm trying to post this on Facebook right now.
Perfect, perfect. You are acquiring the request that has been put out there, which is that we all share and share the love. Post and share the love.
All right, so I'm posting. We're posted. All right, I think here we are.
Perfect.
Okay.
And you might have to, if you did share a watch party, you might hear the feedback. So just make sure you've turned the volume down on your thing.
Well, I think I might just close Facebook because there's a weird delay in watching it, and that's a little disconcerting. Okay, so now we're back on Zoom. Hi, everyone.
Perfect. Dave, tell us where you are. Tell us about yourself. Are you going to introduce yourself musically?
I'm not. Well, I don't know. I'm just grabbing my guitar. I'm not in Ireland right now. I'm actually in Los Angeles. My wife and I had a choice of either staying in Ireland or being here. Our situation is a little better in Los Angeles. I have a studio, which is where I'm sitting right now. And so if we had stayed in Ireland, like, I would not be doing this live broadcast in the same way. All my stuff would be in Los Angeles. So that's where I am. Nice. Now I'm trying to figure out how to negotiate this whole new world. I was supposed to be in Europe right now playing a lot of different concerts. I think tonight I would be in Salzburg, Austria, and tomorrow night in Vienna. All those things have been canceled until who knows when. The Irish dates were canceled a little while ago. The minute we found out that the St. Patrick's Day celebration was going to be canceled, that was a sure bet that nothing else was going to happen in Dublin either. So anyway, here we are.
Amazing. Must be a big turnaround for you.
Well, I wouldn't be the only artist that's experienced this, but yeah, let's suffice to say, I feel like a dinosaur who just got hit by an asteroid, you know, right. And thus extincting life as I've understood it. For me and for most other musicians, as revenue from streams and downloads and things have declined as a share of our income, we have played a lot of concerts, and particularly because I'm most well known as a kirtan artist for doing call and response live events. That's really been the bread and butter of my career. And to suddenly not be able to do any live events is kind of, well, it's stunning as an artist, and it's prompting a little like redefinition, I would say.
Yeah, because of course, calling and responding to people who aren't there is a difficult one, right?
Yeah, and unfortunately, I think many of us now are suddenly dealing with upload speeds on the internet, and at this point, technologically, we haven't figured out a way that, at least from home, that we can play together with other musicians.
Right.
And which is something that a lot of people are definitely trying to figure out how to do. When you try and do it on Facebook, there's a lag and a delay, so you can't really play in time with anyone else.
Right.
So,
That's totally my excuse. That's exactly when people say you're not in time. I say there's a Facebook lag, you know, and
it's a lag, right? Yeah. But hopefully we can start to do this in the future. But right now the technology is not there, and particularly for kirtan, it's a call and response thing, and so it's very much dependent upon people singing back and me interacting with those people who are singing back. So it's virtually impossible. I know that there are some kirtan artists who are doing things that you can sing along to. It's something, it's not the same.
Right.
So
wow, I hadn't even thought about it in terms of call and response, because of course, I mean, I was only just thinking about it of people sharing, but the call and response is devastating. Tell us about the beauty of call and response. Like what's really the the essence of this? Because, you know, my first hit of devotional music was when my first trip at Bhakti Fest 2014. Right. I hadn't really come across it until then. So what's special about a call and response offering?
Well, you know, as the 20th century and the 21st century progressed, music became something less that people participated in and more something that you consumed.
Right.
Suddenly, you know, recorded music became available and you could have it pretty much anywhere, anytime. And things got more and more convenient as, you know, the portable mobile device era unfolded and you could just stream it wherever. But historically, music served a rather different purpose than pure entertainment. It was a way that we connected to one another profoundly, and there's actually, in fact, a lot of evidence that music developed along with our ability to cooperate with one another. Mm-hmm. So it literally puts us into sync with one another, and so human societies who survived to pass their genes along to the modern age were musical. Every known society is musical in some way or another. And it's part of like the operating system of how we link up and connect. And in many cases, especially in terms of like religious or political rituals, were how we stayed moving in one direction to find purpose in our lives. And so some of that has become quite diffused in the modern era, but I'm interested now in the COVID era, how it's reasserted itself. All those videos of people in Italy singing from their balconies.
Right.
You know, these are all ways that people are saying, you know, I'm here and I want to connect. And suddenly that's become more important than listening to recorded music. Streams are down. People aren't isolating, just listening in their headphones. People were doing that before, as I think is a kind of antidote to the onslaught of the modern world. But now that we're in isolation, what we really, really, really want is connection, and connection in a way in which we are participating with one another. It feels, you know, like it is a hole in my heart that there is not a way that I can practice a particular part of my art in the way that I have right now. It really is on hold until we can resume having live events. And this may be some time, you know, it may be 2021 before concerts are permitted again.
Such a crazy time.
It is a crazy time, but I will say that at the point that we can gather together again and sing together again, there's probably nothing that people are going to want to do more than connect and sing and dance and engage in these rituals in which we celebrate our connectedness and our aliveness and our joy. And this is how we transmute our sorrows and our pains into something, you know, that actually sustains us instead of destroys us. So I guess that's a short-ish answer about what the role of singing together is. You know,
and so it sounds like you're hopeful that this cocooning is really a functional remembrance or returning to something that we had as communities, as villages.
Oh, for sure. This is an amazing redefinition of culture, economics, politics. And it sounds weird to say this, but I hope it goes on long enough that real fundamental changes occur. The danger is, I'll compare this, like if you get a prescription for antibiotics and the doctor says, take them all. And you say, well, you know, I'm feeling better now and I don't really like antibiotics. I'll stop of them. Okay. And so you do, and your symptoms go away. But then a couple of weeks later, suddenly you're sick again. You go back to the doctor and the doctor says, did you take all the antibiotics? And you go, no, you know, I stopped halfway through. It's like, then they're like, well, okay, I can prescribe you something stronger, but the side effects are going to be worse, you know, or you could go in and they're like, sorry, we don't have anything to help you now. So you have to finish the course of treatment. And in a sense, we're experiencing a kind of treatment on a worldwide social, political, and cultural scale. We've been asked to sit by ourselves or with only those people that we live with and be quiet and look within ourselves and cease doing all those things that our minds were engaged in, to stop all the habits that we had and actually sort of become temporary monks on a worldwide scale. That's amazing. It upends everything that we valued, everything we've taken for granted. And, you know, God, I've been around, knocking around the yoga world for 20 years playing kirtans, and, you know, have heard so many people talk about, you know, the shift is coming, the change is coming, as if like somehow we were going to all hold hands and like suddenly it was going to happen. You know, it might be happening, but it's happening in a way that will upend our theologies and our senses of self and community. You know, the virus doesn't care. It's not malevolent. It's not benevolent. It's just doing its thing. And it's not concerned whether we prosper or fail. It's not concerned whether we find our, you know, each of us finds our heart's desire or our perfect expression or connection. It just is. Humankind up to this point has maybe had this illusion that we were special and that this universe was for us in some specific way. Instead, we're having to contend with you know, I hesitate to use the word God, but a force that simply is present and doing its thing and doesn't really care whether we live or die. That really shifts fundamentally our understanding of who we are and what our place is in the universe. We're going to have to think and act differently as a result of it. And if this goes on long enough, we will. But if we stop this process too soon, one, there's the health effects that, you know, we may get sicker. I mean, there are people so determined to not change and get back to where we were, you know, in some illusory perfect, like how it was a month ago or something, you know, that it could make people sicker and it could make the economic effects last longer. So we have to endure the course of treatment in order to get through and actually change. I can't say what the outcome of it is, except for that I think that is this utopia or dystopia that we're headed toward? Right.
Well, maybe one comes out of the other.
Well, perhaps we'll look back and see that dystopia is what we've been living. But in the end, we all wish to live. Despite all the Hollywood fantasies about disasters and things like that, in the end, we want to live. We want to live as individuals. We want to live as a species. And I think that we'll make that choice. But what comes out the other side is how we relate to one another is going to be fundamentally changed. And one of those things is we'll come back to community space in ways that we share things with a different sense of purpose and meaning around it. And I always thought in some ways, you know, the art that I was practicing, kirtan, which gathers for people who are unfamiliar in your audience, people gather together and sing Sanskrit mantras in a call and response fashion. And it starts slowly and it speeds up, it gets faster and faster until people are like dancing and clapping. And it's kind of like a sort of wild Indian style gospel show, you know? But everybody's participating in it. And the distinction between performer and audience becomes utterly blurred. Everybody's singing, everybody's participating, and it's an experience of mass joy.
Right.
It's really, really special and amazing. And a lot of people are like, oh, well, it came out of the Hindu world and it's religious and new agey, etc. It's been my specialty in some ways to talk about it in terms of neuroscience, in terms of psychology, and to look at it from a lot of other perspectives, because whether you know anything about it or not, if you participate in it, it works.
Right.
So I think that these things are going to come back in a big way. But I too have to sit still and stop doing the thing that I was so identified with and reinvent myself as an artist.
Right.
So, and I think there are many other artists that are having to do this. So how do we do it? For me, I've been writing songs all along. It's just that 20 years ago, I started playing in yoga studios doing Sanskrit mantras because I'd lived in an ashram for a while and I was invited to do it. And kind of at the early age of the international yoga movement, I was in the right place at the right time. And, you know, friends of mine who are yoga teachers who are now well known took me around to play for their yoga workshops. And, you know, just the plot thickened and developed.
Yeah.
And my first album had 3 songs in Sanskrit on it as part of a whole other, you know, bunch of compositions. And yet those Sanskrit pieces got played all over the place in yoga studios. So I just kept following the yes.
Right.
As one does. But I've still been writing songs all along. And as it happened in this last year, I made a record in English, which I haven't released yet. Actually, I was going to release it, but somehow the virus shifted up my thinking about it. Maybe I still will release it now. But
so when you say write songs, when you're doing the mantra songs, you don't class them as writing a song because you're just...
Oh, I do. I mean, they're pop song 101. You know, write essentially 2 or 3 little hooks back to back with lyrics that are essentially nonsensical, you know, which actually you do hear that, whether it's, you know, Earth, Wind, and Fire going, body, you know, whatever, or, you know, like there's a ton of nonsensical refrains in pop music. But yeah, it did get me to a deeper sense of, it got me closer to a deeper kind of pop music to write kirtans. But the content of it is either the mantra and what it represents, or it's meant to bring you beyond content.
Yeah.
Whereas,
and I think that's where I'm interested in, because in these conversations, things that have come up with musicians is, you know, and artists, I ask the question, you know, who is your art for?
Right. Well, that's a huge question.
Right.
And up to this point, I would say that my art has been for the people who are participating. I'm there not so much it's not so much about me as much as it's about me facilitating an experience for other people.
Right.
So it's been very much directed toward that. But I can't facilitate that experience right now.
You're being forced into the patriarchy. You're being forced to be a performer now.
Well, you know, the thing is that the songs that I write are investigating my situation. And so there's philosophy to it. And there's also, you know, there's different aspects of my conversation with myself. And, you know, even in the, I mean, songwriters have always done this, even within like the Hindu or the yoga tradition. Kirtans are participatory, but bhajans were poetry. And so they're like commentary on the experience. So the songs I write in English are essentially, you know, bhajans are a kind of poetry, you know? So there's a song that I'm working on a video for right now, like how to make a video for a song from isolation, especially because I just recorded it with another artist an English singer, Sheila Nichols, and we did a duet on it, and we can't really do that in real time. So I'll have to sing it for you without Sheila, but we're trying to make a video together of this song, and we're now working out like lighting and things like that and camera angles from our own,
Right.
in our own houses. And
well, maybe you could do a whole play on it, like a COVID isolation play on it, as if it's filmed on iPhones. They're singing along in the shower or something, or while eating breakfast and reading the paper.
Oh, for sure. And, probably getting people to participate on Zoom in a certain way. So maybe I'll sing you the song. It's about 3 minutes long, and it's relevant to our current situation. It's called The Satellite Sky. It goes like this. I'm calling an impulse of light in the vacuum of night. Can you hear me? I'm swallowed in the heavens so bright, but no one in sight is near me. The satellite sky, vast and empty, the silence of existence that we signal through. Await your reply, lost and lonely, a siren in the distance, sounding deepest blue. I'm calling for you, for conversation, linking up and signing off, never getting close enough to quiet my heart. How separation, a longing we can't satisfy. We are satellites, you and I, echoes apart. We are. To reach you inside, that anger and pride interfere with me. I'm crying across the divide, the satellite sky is here in me.
Satellite Sky, brother.
The short version without Sheila as a duet in it. But the song, in a sense, which I wrote before this circumstance, also in its funny way kind of refers to it. I suppose I was really writing about social media, about people reaching out, and there's all these promises of connection in society, but somehow with all of these opportunities to connect, we connect less and less. Now, the fact that we can't go share a meal in a restaurant, we can't go to a concert together, makes this even more poignant, that we're all alike in our isolation. We are satellites communicating to one another. And all this is echoing across the universe, but we are still fundamentally, like, strangely connected and apart. And the anguish of the moment is that we have to face ourselves as profoundly social creatures.
Right.
That all of the noise about me and mine and what I want to do, all of that is nothing compared to our need for one another and how much we need to connect.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I mean, this concept, this separation versus a unity consciousness,
yeah,
for me, it echoes all over the place. Like in the notion where a performer is on stage or a lecturer is on stage, as opposed to an interactive element with the audience, it's a patriarchal separation. And, you know, your song refers to the satellites, which are fundamentally separate but interconnected.
right.
And then we've got this notion of the journey towards enlightenment, which is the individual going to the unity.
Yeah.
These patterns seem to mimic everywhere about this. It's almost as if things are becoming more vivid, this notion that really we want the unity.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny how when you strip away a lot of the things that you take for granted, what's left is what's really important. And I think this period of time is allowing us to really reflect on that. You know, I mean, there's so many things that you can do, but, you know, well, what should you do becomes an important thing. And like, what really makes our lives rich and meaningful? I think a lot of the times people spend their days doing things that they think that they're supposed to, or doing what we're supposed to get by and make a living. And then when all of a sudden you can't do those things, even if you want to, it puts you into a different space of relationship to yourself and to the people around you. So I think for me right now as an artist, I haven't communicated much with my audience since this started, in some ways because I really had to look in and say, what do I actually have to contribute at this point? You know, what does it mean to be an artist in the midst of this? You know, what can I do? Like, are songs that I write, can those reach out to people in their isolation? Is that, you know, can the art that I make be meaningful in some way? I know that the medium changes now, and it's enabled some other collaborations. I just did a video collaboration with, how did this start? I was sent a video by a percussionist I play with in Hong Kong and China, and she had played on top of a track that a guy in Spain had played. Right. And so then they sent that video, which is like split screen, to me. I recorded a version of me playing something on top of that, and then that gets sent on, and so different artists are adding to it. And
that's great.
It's moved beyond me now. I know it'll come back to me at some point, and I'll see what end up happening. But artists are going to collaborate, and so this is a way to do it. You know, add something to my composition, and, you know, then send it on to somebody else.
Right. It's brilliant, in fact.
Yeah. So there's whole new ways of going about this. And for a moment, you know, my life as a kirtan artist is on pause, but that doesn't mean that my life as an artist is on pause. It's just I'll pursue different
Right.
things and collaborate in different ways.
Right. Well, how do you feel that this is, you know, I mean, as a kirtan artist, you're exposed to a lot of spiritual presencing, you know, the bhaving of nature, which, for people who don't know, it's kind of like when you blend into the collective resonance of the divine. And it usually can happen when music, and my first, you know, I mean, outside of meditation, my first bhaving experience out in the world was at Bhakti Fest. You know, I think it was 2014, my first Bhakti, when it was just, I had never experienced such a collective of individuals all surrendering to the whole. So, you know, your work must have taken you through a lot of presencing. How have you found that those years of kirtaning have set you up to be okay and to deal with this transition?
Well, first of all, I toggle between in periods of intense solitude and periods of intense public presence.
Right.
You know, so I'm simultaneously a hermit and also a person who's completely comfortable, you know, on a stage in front of 1,000 people, which is so I'm psychologically equipped on one hand to endure isolation.
I thought you said psychologically split for one moment,
Well,
which would also be a good description. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I'm also psychologically split. I mean, I'm not utterly alone. I mean, my wife and I are, you know, sharing our household and finding ways to be together and also be apart as needed. And I know many people's relationships are probably going through a certain crucible right now. And you know, even in our discussions of it, you know, it's like continue the process. Somehow, you know, having to be isolated with one another for a month now has meant that, you know, issues come up that maybe we had managed to avoid and not deal with up to this point. And now, you know, we've made a commitment to deal with them.
Right.
And if, in a sense, we're almost grateful for the isolation because we have this time, we have this opportunity. And I mean, the danger is, of course, things come up that could, you know, that could threaten to you know, create wreckage in your relationship. But if you see it through,
Right.
Something really amazing can happen.
I think that's an important bit that I'm taking from your message, is see the course of the medication, of the event through to its end. If people are starting to feel this burn, how do they know when it's the end and it's not, you know, instead of it being like excessively exaggerating the perpetual notion of the argument or whatever? Like, how do people know what is the natural course of the antibiotics, for example?
Well, look, resistance comes up, first of all. And I mean, we're starting to see some political kickback to this, you know, people saying, you know, my freedom, you know, and like, because somehow, you know, people are asserting that somehow they themselves as an individual are more important than all of us.
Right.
And I mean, this was going to happen and it is going to happen for a while. But, you know, in terms of my own life and the changes that I've gone through, I realized that there's a point at which the pain of changing is less than the pain of remaining, you know, in whatever situation you were in. I didn't start my life as a professional musician until, you know, much later than you normally do. And part of it had to do with, like, I was a sort of psychological mess of a lot of things that made me kind of fearful to go out in front of people. And yet I had a lot of friends who were musicians who were facing that thing, and finally reached a point where I just couldn't stand any longer to sit with my fears and anxieties, and it was easier actually for me to make a record and start to go out and perform than it was for me to remain constricted. Okay, so.
But that's interesting because, you know, we had Soul on last week, Soul David Ray, and he was saying that sometimes it's easier. In fact, often it's easier to take the shortcut, to not deal with stuff, to sit in front of the TV and watch a crap program or smoke some dope. Or,
well,
you know.
Saul's a dear friend of mine because he was there at the beginning of this too. I mean, I met Saul in, I think, I want to say 1998 at Yoga Works in Santa Monica, where I was, you know, somehow now the house band.
Right.
And Saul was teaching, and he came up to me and was like, "Hi, I'm your new best friend." And I was like, "What's your name?" You know, but he turned out to be my new best friend.
Yeah.
And he went on to, you know, produce my first 2 kirtan records, and he and Sean Korn and Shiva Ray and other people brought me around, you know, to play music for their yoga workshops.
Yeah.
And So they were part of the crucible of me, moving on out into the world, me, and at that point in time, making a change because it was easier to change than to stay the same.
Right.
So on a political and sociological level, I feel like we're in the same way, in the same situation. There's a lot of forces right now where people are like, hey, this is really difficult. And maybe can we just go back to like, I know it was dysfunctional, but it was working.
Right, exactly.
Right? But the thing is that the longer this goes on, it will become easier to conceive of moving in another direction.
Right.
I think we're actually really seeing very vividly how we are connected, and we're not, our notions even of individualism and freedom and liberty have always been contingent and always will be. In very real ways, I'm not free unless you're free and everybody else is free.
Right.
And somebody insisting on their freedom without any responsibility to how it affects other people is restricting. It actually assaults my liberty in certain ways. Right. So we're going to have to rethink a lot of ideas about ourselves as individuals and our connection to one another, and that has economic, cultural, and theological implications.
Yeah, I love that. I love that notion that it's, and I think that's where the excitement comes. A lot of people are excited.
Yeah, I know we should be depressed, but I don't, I do toggle between optimism and realism, on a day-to-day basis, because, nobody ever lost money betting on human vanity, cruelty, and willingness to go for immediate gratification as opposed to long-term fulfillment. So our qualities as humans are still very much with us, and we have to work with them and have some compassion as much as we can. But at the same time, I see a lot of evidence that we actually might end up doing the right thing.
Nice.
And I want to keep holding that space because I feel like that's really the only option, is to do that.
Right. And that's also another thing that's come up. It's like, from all the conspiracy, like what's happening here and where's it going and what's the consequences. Fundamentally, it doesn't matter if you hold the sort of sovereign space of a sort of a positive outcome from this.
Right. Yeah. So I don't know. I feel like I should sing you another song.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. So
and by the way, it's if people want to call in with questions for Dave, you can do that now. You'll come in and you'll come to the waiting room, and I'll tag you in after this song. So in the video.
Part of my family's from the what? Okay, sorry.
No, I was talking to the audience. In the video link, the number, the Zoom telephone number with the passwords below.
All right. So the Satellite Skies was a little bit of a kind of a move into jazz. There's another roots thing here that my father's side of the family are all Southerners, and I didn't grow up in the South, but somehow country music ends up sort of in my mouth in ways that are unexpected. So
this is South American, not South Island, right?
No, I'm talking South. Yeah, South, not South, like as in the old Confederacy. Like, we're talking Texas, Alabama, and Mississippi. Anyway, so. There's an ember of a falling star in the hot springs of my veins, fuel of a fusion's fire. We burst to flame and then expire. I lay my babe down in the water. I sing, everybody born of wonder, born of pain. Everybody, we shall pass just as we came. In fire and flood, the earth gives issues, steam and mud, blood and tissue, thunder rolls and then it rains. Flesh is brief and labor tires. I'm bathed in sweat and tears. swollen with desire, in every cell a coiled viper of wisdom and despair, birthmark that I bear. I sing, hey buddy, born a wonder, born of pain. Everybody, we shall pass just as we came. Fire fossil leaps in black coal, fumes of a missile deep in my soul. Thunder rolls and then it rains, and my heart is filled with fear and hunger. Storm and thunder will surely tremble and subside. I know I will be lifted higher to the light. I sing my best in the choir. I put my faith in the wounds of the martyr. I send my hymn out on the wire, release and reunion in the eternity of fire. I sing, hey, buddy, born a wonder, born of Cain. Everybody, we shall pass just as we came. A child is born 1 billion years old, diamond formed on a volcano, thunder rolls, let it rain. Yeah, 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 yeah,
Great. I mean, it's totally different to my knowledge of your music, you know, because I've never heard you sing any of this stuff.
Yeah, right. Yeah, most people haven't.
Right.
So, you know, but given the circumstances we're in right now, that's what I can do, you know?
I like it. I like it.
I mean, I could sing you something in Sanskrit, but, you know,
Yeah.
somehow it seems at this point better to communicate in English and better
Yeah.
to, you know, write from that space. So,
You know, it's interesting because this notion of you know, you hit on before about the words that are said that are just sort of filler words for different songs. But Sanskrit can sound like that to a lot of people, but there's a harmonic in the actual words that is different from just doobly doo ba boo ba doo doo.
yeah, right.
What's your experience of that in the sense of using them and singing them?
Well, there's an intentionality to the sounds, and that works. I mean, I've often explained, for example, the mantra Om Namah Shivaya in terms of its sounds. That oh is a universal expression of wonder, and is a universal expression of like closeness, and feels like satisfaction, and sh is quiet, and E is freedom, and V is vibration. And so the meaning of the sound is in the mantra.
Right.
So there's a long history and system of how that works. And people say, do we have to chant in Sanskrit? And my answer is, well, no, but it works.
Right.
So like, I don't feel the need to reinvent it. That said, I can imagine a day in the not too distant future in which public singing becomes a much more typical thing. I mean, in Ireland, it actually always has been, and in other cultures. And people may not want to sing in Sanskrit. So the question is, how do we find mantras in English and other languages which have the same sonic effect and which which can have the same transformational quality. And, you know, my mind goes to like creating kind of little koans, you know, like words that go together that, that somehow can create that effect of stopping your mind and yet be memorable and repeatable.
Wow. Do you
I
think that's possible? I mean, because you know,
yeah,
there's a big kind of like, oh no, we're Sanskrit and we're the first language and we're the only ones that do, you know, audible sounds, maybe some Hebrew as well.
look, Sanskrit is I mean, I've chanted in, I think at last count, like 28 different countries. So I've had the experience of like, you know, chanting in Sanskrit in, you know, Berlin, Bangkok, Bali, Boston, you know, like whatever.
In
And
Sanskrit, right?
in Sanskrit, yeah. And the experience is transportable. It's experienced the same everywhere. And so there's a
Right,
beautiful unity to the fact that nobody actually really, or very few people actually speak that language.
right, right.
So, you know, if we do something in English, then, you know, it's not going to create the same sense of unity. So I like the Sanskrit, but I'm also, as an artist, interested in how we can get people to sing in a
Right.
participatory way, that has some of the same, you know, neurological effects
Right.
that it produces.
But I mean,
So,
do you think that the Sanskrit had the same effects in India when it was produced, like when people did know what they were saying?
uh, you know, it's hard to know because I can't go back
Right.
there. And I mean, Sanskrit is the root language of most of the modern Indo-European languages, and that includes everything from like Hindi and Bengali and Marathi to, you know, to German, French, and Russian and English. So there is something incredibly unifying about it on that
Right.
level because
Right.
it's a root language, but it's not the root language of everybody. I mean, it's not the root language of Chinese.
Yeah. Or
Um,
Persian.
Persian possibly,
Right.
um, because of the way that it spread, you know. But
Maybe it was Welsh then that it didn't.
well, there's a few languages in in Europe that aren't accounted for. Finnish, Hungarian, and Basque being two of them. That they're not sure how they got there because they're not related to anything around them. But I'm interested as an artist about where I can go with kirtan in the future that's not in Sanskrit. Um, and what I will say is that for me, music, all the things that I write, whether they're Sanskrit pieces or English pieces, start as wordless pieces in which, like,
Wordless pieces.
yeah. So there's sounds that I'm making, uh, and they feel right to make those sounds in a particular place. And so the sounds feel meaningful. And what I'll do, like both of the songs that I just played you, they were originally wordless. And after a while, certain sounds were in certain places, and like I had no idea what they were about. But then words came in that used those sounds. And so then I have like a little map of a bunch of different sounds. And then one day there'd be this sudden awareness. I'd be like, oh, I just suddenly realized what the song is about. And the aboutness came out of the sounds that I was making. Like those sounds were coming from my unconscious mind. And then there's a point where they leapt into consciousness where I was like, oh, that sound sounds like this.
Right. Right.
You know?
Would you say that's sort of comparable to this thing I was mentioning before about the womb, the oneness, and from the oneness, individuality comes out, the meaning comes out from the singularity?
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, I think so. The meaning's always there, and our work, you know, as humans is to kind of discover it. Well, actually, I'll back up. It's actually a fundamental philosophical question for me. Is there meaning there?
Right.
I don't know.
Because
But
you said before there was no words. So is
right,
it a feeling? Is it an essence first?
right. Yeah, well, yeah, the feeling is there. And there's an essence there. And the thing is, the way our human brains are connected is that we are meaning detectors.
Right.
We notice patterns, and our survival was based upon discovering those patterns. You know, rustling in bushes, you know, could mean panther about to leap out
Right,
and
right.
eat, you know. So we find these hints and these patterns and we connect them together, and somehow we get meaning from that. Is there actual meaning out there? I don't know. There's a mass of like signals and blips and, you know, like vibrations and stuff like that, and my brain and yours and everybody's are organized to interpret them in certain ways. And, you know, and our culture does. But I know that as a singer, like these things just come up, and for a long time, I'll just sit there with it, you know, like even the satellite sky, there's a wordless section of it where I was just going, you know, you know, and I left that in the song because it felt like an emotional, it was emotionally declarative, and it said something on the emotional plane that couldn't be said intellectually.
Right.
And I think there's a role for that. I mean, people like singing nonsense in a way.
Right. It's like humming in a way.
Yeah. Yeah.
And humming, the interesting thing came up about the drone, you know, the background from the, and our last conversation, I was asking you where you got your drone from. Last time I was in your house, you had one of those bhakti boxes, what are they called?
Well,
Boxes.
a brand name called a Ragini, but it's an electronic tambura.
Right, right. And you just had it playing constantly. Is one of my fondest memories from your house. It's just this constant drone in the background.
Yeah, we keep it on super low. It, you know, part of creating meaning is I guess reference point. Okay. And so sonically, there's a lot of noise going on out there in the universe. And the minute you have a single tone that they're all moving in reference to, suddenly you've got music. And so I leave the tambura box on, you know, at a very, very low volume level in my house, because it means that, you know, my neighbor's lawnmower or the garbage truck going by or whatever suddenly become musical in that space. So, you know, that's the role of the drone in Indian music, is that the philosophy under it is that all arise from the one and return to it. And so that drone represents that one, that indwelling consciousness and love, and the music arises from it and it returns to it. So that reference point is itself an organizing principle, you know, and without love, our societies really can't organize themselves around anything that is healthy and causes us to thrive. And maybe that is a shift that's occurring right now, because we organized our societies around the pursuit of money, and have seen that as the measure of success and the purpose for doing anything or so many things. I mean, not exclusively, but it's certainly in American and European and Chinese society, just as a few examples, it's become paramount. Now we have a situation in which a lot of people don't have any money. All of a sudden, like, everybody's broke, and we're still here, and we're trying to figure out, you know, what we're going to do with ourselves and with the time. And if you take money out of the equation, things start to look different, you know?
We need a new reference point.
We need a new reference point.
And maybe the notion is, you know, because what I think that Kirtan does so beautifully is it holds that reference point of oneness, with the individuality of the mantras coming over, which simultaneously fold back into the oneness of blend. And maybe right now what the world really needs is a lot more Kirtan.
Yeah, it does. And unfortunately, that might be really great medicine for the world, but we can't take it right now. It's not available to us, because the medicine that we really need is each other.
Right.
We really need the medicine of our community and our shared values. We need the medicine of love. And yet, curiously, it's unavailability that I think maybe points up for us just how important it is.
Right.
So I think we're having the experience of missing something now that we didn't even know we were missing. And that the longer this goes on, the more desperately we'll really, really want to have it, the more we will organize ourselves around how it is that we can express it and experience it. And that has to have positive implications for the world that we live in, for the future.
Wow. Well, Dave, it's been absolutely great having you on.
Mark?
You know, great wisdom, great experience there. Tell us what you're doing. How can people get to you at this time of cocooning? What projects you need support on?
I do occasionally answer messages on Facebook, although I haven't really been a lot on social media lately, but I do have a website, davestringer.com. I have a Bandcamp page, which is my preferred way for people to access music. It's set up so if you're broke, you can still get it. If you want to contribute to me, you can do that. But it's available. My new record, Thrum, is finished, but it's not out. I'm trying to figure out how and when to release it. People's attention spans are short, so I imagine I'm going to release it one song at a time.
Right.
I'm working on a video for The Satellite Sky right now, which will probably be the first noise that I'll make about it. But you can message me on Bandcamp. Music is available there. If somebody writes me and they want to hear Thrum, I would consider making that available privately, at first, slow little trickles.
Right. Soft launch.
Yeah. Pardon?
A soft launch.
A soft launch, yeah. I am sending it around to friends at this point and figuring out how that's going to play out in the long term. I feel like I've got some time to think about it. But I am beginning the process of also creating some online courses through Nam Yoga in LA. I'm working on a Chinese version of it, and I'm working on a German version of it through actually the Swiss Yoga Conference got canceled this year.
Right.
And instead they're kind of doing something online. We're doing some experiments about it. And what I think we're planning on doing is two things. One, exploring the neuroscience of kirtan and how that works, which is something I love to talk about. And the other thing is actually giving people the music in simple form so that they can play along. And so that I can actually teach people how to play these things in isolation. There's a lot of people at home who are like, well, I guess I bought this guitar and I haven't really played. And yeah, there, I see one in the background. Yeah. And so my plan is to start offering quite shortly some courses where people can play with me. And they're an extension of these kirtan flight schools that I've been doing, in which we put people in bands and get them to play together and lead kirtan, which is super transformative and really fun and a little bit terrifying until you get through the fear factor of it. So I'm going to be doing some of those things. These last few weeks I've been setting up my studio so that, it works for video and sound. And so this is all coming. So anyway, emailing me should be easy through Bandcamp or my website. And yeah, you can find me on Facebook. And
perfect. Yeah, and you might answer a message on Facebook every once in a while.
I do answer them, and I'll get better at it. Actually, there's a message on Facebook that I think if you send me a DM, it says, "Hey, I'm really busy, but email me." So my email.
You have an autoresponder.
Sorry.
That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but that's fine. You're busy and you're creating. I'm very excited to see the learn along with Dave video course.
Yeah,
that would be great.
And before I was doing this, I was actually professionally a video editor. So I am about to return to creating things in video space. Like that. I'm producing some records for some other artists, remotely. It's funny. I'm actually quite busy right now.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Perfect. Well, thanks for making the time to join us. Oh, wow. Thank you to my guests, Dave Stringer and Swami Beyondananda, Steve Behrman. This has been a Feel It Friday. And as I said, the reason why it's Feel It Friday is because it's really get stuck into the feeling of it. You've got the weekend now to melt and to mold and to surrender with authentic kindness to yourself. That's the ploy. That's the plan. Next week, where are my notes? Oh, my word. Next week, we've got a great week lined up. Some key people. Ooh, we've got Matthew Human, Dr. Thornton Streeter. We've got a whole load of acupuncturists talking about energy. We've got Ananda Ray, and we've got Dylan Newcomb. Oh, it's a good week next week, and maybe Zach Baraka. I still haven't confirmed with him. So again, as my dad says, Markabadi. This is my book, Book Evolve. You can find it bookevolve.com. You can find me, markabadi.com. Please share the video in the share button down here. Host the watch parties if you can. They're much more better for us and for our ratings. Share, like, come back again. We'll see you after the weekend. Thanks again, Steve. Thank you. And
thank you,
everyone. Much love. Be kind.